Good morning and good afternoon and good evening to those of you who are joining us from outside of the Washington area. My name is Suzanne Maloney. I'm the Vice President and Director of Foreign Policy here at the Brookings Institution. On behalf of Brookings and our Center for Middle East Policy, I'm truly delighted to welcome you all to today's event, U.S.-Jordan Relations, Jordan's Vision for the Future. We gather virtually today to welcome Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and expatriates of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Ayman Safadi, to Brookings. Minister Safadi, it is an honor to have you with us today. Allow me to take one moment to introduce our distinguished speaker. Minister Safadi has held office since January 2017. Prior to his appointment, he was a member of the Jordanian Senate. During his impressive diplomatic career, he has also served as an advisor to His Majesty King Abdullah II, as Minister of State, and as the Jordanian government's official spokesperson. I will be joined in moderating today's conversation with Minister Safadi by my colleague, Brookings Senior Fellow, Bruce Riedel. I can think of no one better equipped to shape our discussion today than Bruce. Bruce's career spanned 3 decades across the intelligence community and at the highest levels of the US government. He was a senior advisor on South Asia and the Middle East to 4 presidents of the United States on the staff of the National Security Council at the White House. Bruce's latest book, published just last year with the Brookings Institution Press, is entitled Jordan and America, An Enduring Friendship. And the book tells the remarkable story of the relationship between Jordan and the United States and how leaders from both countries have navigated the complicated waters of one of the most volatile regions of the world. Before we begin this discussion, I'd like to give a quick shout out to several people who've made today's event possible. We are so grateful to Ambassador Dina Kawar and her staff at the Embassy of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan for their cooperation, especially at a time when the pandemic unfortunately complicated our hopes to meet today in person. This event is part of the 2nd successful year of the Center for Middle East Policy's project on the sources of Middle East instability. This is a wide-ranging initiative key to the work of our Center for Middle East Policy and key to the mission of charting a path, political, economic, and social, to a Middle East at peace with itself and the world. I would like to take this opportunity to express our sincere gratitude to Anne and Andrew Tisch for their support of this project and for their support of the institution as a whole. Without their generous support, our Center for Middle East Policy would not be able to produce its array of research and analysis year-round. I would like to underscore their and our steadfast commitment to Brookings' core value of independence, which allows our scholars complete discretion in their work. And I note that, like all Brookings events, the views expressed today are solely those of the speakers. A few final housekeeping notes. A final reminder that we are on the record today and streaming live. We will be taking questions from viewers, and I encourage you to submit them via email to events@brookings.edu or via Twitter at the hashtag JordanUS. And now it is my distinct honor to welcome Minister Safadi to the virtual stage for opening keynote remarks. Minister, the floor is yours.
Afternoon, good evening to all our colleagues who are with us today. And I want to start by thanking you for this opportunity to speak to Brookings Institute on what's going on with Jordan, with the region at a very, very important time. So thank you so much for that. And let me start by emphasizing, as you said, the enduring nature of the partnership and friendship that Jordan and the United States have had over decades. Our cooperation continues on both of bilateral field and also in our joint effort to try and resolve the many crises that continue to haunt the region and deny its people the peace, stability, and prosperity that they all deserve. I'm here in Washington today for talks with the administration and on how we can further advance our bilateral ties. Obviously, our friendship is solid. The US support for Jordan has been extremely important in enabling us to address the many challenges that we face. Lots of it is part of or as a result of the external shocks with which the kingdom has had to deal over decades. Obviously, we'll be discussing the new MOU as the current one will expire by the end of this year. And we're hopeful that we'll be able to conclude yet another MOU that would ensure continuation of the critical U.S. support for Jordan, and for which we remain extremely grateful. Obviously, other issues on the agenda are the region and what our joint effort to try and resolve crises. And this is a very critical time in the region. If we look around, we continue to suffer from many crises. Unfortunately, horizons for reaching solutions to many of them are not that promising. So we need to continue to work together on trying to find paths towards progress, at least, and resolving those issues. And the United States' role is key and is essential for the success of all these efforts. Obviously, on top of our agenda here is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We're all keen on maintaining the calm. We're all keen on stabilizing the situation. But I think it is imperative to say that maintaining this calm is going to need measures that go beyond addressing the immediate needs and the immediate challenges on the ground to creating political horizon that would revitalize efforts to achieve the just and lasting peace. That is a strategic choice for Jordan, and that an objective for which Jordan has continued to work and dedicate all resources over decades. To do that, we have to move quickly. We cannot take the current calm for granted. Something's got to give. And that means basically bringing the parties back to the negotiation table with a view to moving towards the two-state solution, which for us in Jordan is the only path towards achieving that peace. Ultimately, Middle East peace cannot jump over the core issue, which is the Palestinian-Israeli issue. Palestinian people deserve to live in a free, independent state on the borders on the lines of 1967, with occupied Jerusalem as capital, side by side, Israel, with a view to again pooling all our resources so that we can create the better future that we will all seek. So in my talks here today, we'll be having a very thorough conversation with our U.S. partners on how we can create a path to restarting negotiations and move forward. Obviously, we know how difficult the situation is. We know how challenging. The PNA is facing tremendous challenges, and both in terms of its ability to deliver on the needs of its people, but also in terms of assuring its people that the path to peace remains viable and that we need to move forward. So that is one area of concern that we'll be focusing on. Obviously, the other issue that I'll be discussing here is efforts to get to a political solution to the Syrian crisis. Reality is there's been no strategy on dealing with Syria, and status quo politics is not an option, particularly for us in the region that continue to live with the terrible consequences of that crisis. So what we want to do is to, again, see how we can start a path towards that political solution. Ultimately, this crisis has caused so much destruction, has caused so much suffering, and it's got to stop. And we all agree that there's no military solution to that conflict. The only solution is political. 254 provides a framework within which we can move. So that is what we're doing. And in Jordan, we're doing everything we possibly can to, in coordination with our partners and friends, to see how we can, again, get on a meaningful process towards achieving that. As you know, in Jordan, we've suffered the consequences of regional crises. We've been at the receiving end of every crisis in the region. And the Syrian crisis in particular has had a tremendously negative impact on us. 1.3 million Syrians in Jordan, only 10% of whom live in refugee camps. The rest are in every city, town, and village of the country. 50% of Syrians in Jordan are under the age of 15. And the needs of those refugees are no longer emergency relief. They need schools, they need jobs, and most importantly, they need hope and a dignified life. And I say that at a time when we bring the alarm about the dwindling support towards refugees and towards host communities. So yes, there are other problems elsewhere in the world, but those refugees remain there and their needs remain essential, and we cannot victimize them twice, once by conflict and a second time by not helping them and abandoning them to despair and bitterness and anger, and that will be a threat to all of us. Obviously, our eyes are also on Iraq, and we believe that Iraq has achieved a tremendous victory over Daesh. Stabilizing Iraq is key to the stability of the whole region. So we remain committed to supporting Iraq and making sure that Iraq continues on a path towards regaining its stability and providing the dignified and prosperous lives for its people. Again, I can go on for, there are lots of challenges with which we're grappling in the region. And I think, but what matters is probably step back a little bit, refocus, and have a proper sort of assessment of what we're doing vis-a-vis each conflict. We cannot continue to double down on policies and action that has not resulted in the desired objective. We have to reassess, and we have to do what's right and try and resolve those crises. So I'll just stop at that as an opening for the conversation, and I'll be more than happy to engage and respond to any comment or question that is raised there. And again, allow me to say a big thank you to you and to your colleagues for this opportunity.
Minister Safadi, thank you so much for those opening remarks. You've given us a great deal to think about and a great deal to discuss over the course of the next hour that we'll be here together today. Let me just start with a kind of broad picture. You've arrived in Washington at a time of fairly intense diplomacy for the United States and Europe. You've come at a time when the Biden administration has really put a great emphasis on the focus on strategic competition with great powers, particularly with China, but also, of course, with Russia. And there has been a sense that the intense focus of Washington over the course of the past 20 years, particularly since the 9/11 attacks on the Middle East, has waned as these other issues have begun to loom much more urgently. And I wondered if you have a sense from your conversations with the Biden administration about US staying power in the region, about how this pivot to deal with the broader strategic competition may impact the amount of time and energy, particularly at the highest levels of the administration, for the very protracted and dangerous issues that we face in the Middle East.
Thank you. Look, I mean, we do understand the United States has to deal with a lot of issues that go beyond the Middle East, but our understanding and our discussions with the US continue to lead us to conclude that the US remains interested in the region and is trying to do whatever it can to help us tackle all those challenges. I mean, obviously, priorities could shift from one day to another, given the nature of developments that take place. But ultimately, on the peace process, we do appreciate the positions that the new administration has taken in terms of reasserting its commitment to the two-state solution, the very clear stand it took against settlements as illegal as impediment to achieving peace, restoring support to UNRWA, which is key because we all understand how important it is for UNRWA to be able to continue to deliver its key vital services to 5.6 million Palestinians. So the US has made announcements that are extremely important and that have restored hope that we can work together towards again revitalizing talks and get back on the table. On Iraq, the US remains supportive of the Iraqi process to try again and stabilize and move on with a political process that would address the challenges that country face. So on all those fronts, we continue to talk, we engage almost on a daily basis, and we try to work together. But what I would like to say is that we cannot just rely solely in the US to come and do everything for us. We have to do the heavy lifting in the region ourselves, and we have to engage in a two-way traffic whereby we do what we have to do, and the US is there to support and come up with ideas. So that is really the premise of what we're trying to do in Jordan, is to see how we can come with ideas, with proposals, and with work that would ultimately be new basis for a joint partnership in trying to address those issues.
Mr. Minister, let me also welcome you to Brookings this morning and to the United States. I'd like to stick with the issue of your neighbor, to the west, Israel and the Palestinian territories. It's no secret that King Abdullah and his father found dealing with former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu unpleasant and, more importantly, unproductive. You now have a new government in Israel. And last year, you and the Israeli government initialed a really monumental agreement on developing solar power to produce desalinated water. For a country which is as water stressed as yours, this is potentially a major, major breakthrough. Could you say some words about your relationship with the new Israeli government, about this agreement, and whether this agreement can be broadened to include the Palestinians as well?
But good morning to you, and allow me to start by wishing you a happy birthday. I know it was yesterday or the day before, so best wishes, and again, best wishes for a happy new year to all of you. And yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, relations with Israel under the previous government were extremely difficult. It is no secret that the impact of its policies have been detrimental not only to Jordan-Israel relations, but also to the overall effort to bring about peace and stability and progress towards solving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. With the new Israeli government, obviously we have our agreements and we have our disagreements, but we do talk, we're engaging, and we're engaging from a point of departure that we want to be able to contribute to an ecosystem that would allow all of us in the region to move forward, again, with the peace process, because the more progress you make with the peace process, the better the chances for all of us to come together and address many other challenges, including the challenge of the shortage of water, climate, and other issues. So we have open channels with the new Israeli governments. We talk. They know our position extremely well on the two-state solution and the need for creating economic and political horizons for the Palestinians and for the peace process. And we're also looking at ways through which we can contribute to a better sort of environment in terms of addressing a lot of the bilateral issues that need to be addressed and have been ignored, again, due to the policies of the previous government in the past. We're all talking about the blue for green now, but I'd like to remind you that we also, many years ago, we were talking about the Red Dead, which was a major project that would not only have contributed to addressing the water shortage issue for us, for Israelis and the Palestinians, but also would have had a major environmental impact in terms of saving the Dead Sea, allowing for creating energy and all of that. And we were about to issue the tender before the previous Israeli government decided to walk out and move forward. So the bottom line is that we're aware of the challenges. We remain committed to doing everything we possibly can in Jordan to achieve the strategic goal of peace. And as we do that, we believe that we have to engage, and we're engaging very frankly, very openly, and very seriously with a view to, again, try and create a better environment from that prevailed in the past, and ultimately bring everybody to the process of revitalizing the peace process and move forward.
Let me just pick up on this same issue and on the final remarks that you just made about bringing everybody into the process. Obviously, one of the few enduring achievements of Trump administration diplomacy, one that the Biden administration, I think, has supported and in many ways doubled down on, has been this effort to bring about a different relationship between Israel and other core Arab states. The Abraham Accords and the broader engagement of various Arab leaders directly with Israeli leaders is a big change in the context for the regional environment and, of course, for the peace process itself. I wonder what you see as Jordan's role as a longtime interlocutor with the Israelis in this broader engagement of the Arab world, and how this process may be able to assist in getting to, as you said, the core issue. The peace process cannot jump over the core issue, as you said in your initial remarks, of statehood for the Palestinians.
Look, reality is it is not because of the absence of peace treaties between Israel and the Arab worlds that we had a conflict, and that includes peace treaties with Jordan, Egypt, and the Abraham Accords as well. It's because there was a conflict that those peace treaties did not exist. So ultimately, we need to stay focused on the core issue. If these treaties are looked at as an alternative to addressing the core issue, which is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, then the conflict is going to be with us, and every day Palestinian and Israelis are going to wake up next to each other and deal with that conflict. If those treaties are looked at as an encouraging factor to refocus on the core issue, then I think we'll be able to move forward. So again, I lump all of our peace treaties together and say they cannot be an alternative to solving the core issue, which is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and the focus is to try and move forward. The fact is there's been, again, very little progress. Conditions on the ground are worsening. We say the two-state solution is the only way forward, but we all know that solution has been undermined by changing facts on the ground that are making it less and less viable. And the question is, if the two-state solution is compromised, then where do we go from there? I would not say the one-state solution, because the one-state solution is not a solution. It will be the one-state reality, and it will be an ugly reality, whereby apartheid will be institutionalized, and that's something that will not bring peace to all of us and will not solve the conflict and then allow us all in the region to move forward towards addressing our common concerns, including water, including climate, including energy. So I think that is the key the issue here, is that no peace treaty could be an alternative to addressing the Palestinian-Israeli issue, and that is where we need to focus so that we maximize the benefit. Again, in Jordan, we signed a peace treaty 27 years ago. So when we speak, I really like to believe that we speak with the credibility of a peacemaker. We've done everything we possibly can to make sure that we move towards that comprehensive peace. And again, that's why we say we need to get back to the key issue, which is try and create a political horizon to move forward. As we look at the situation on the West Bank now in Gaza, how tenable that is going to be. And we don't want to wake up one day and find ourselves dealing with the same events that we had to deal with last year. When the situation is so fragile, sparks could be many, and we want to avoid that. We believe the only way to do so is to, again, create economic horizons, create political horizons, and get the parties back to the table so that we send a message of hope to the people that the issue is still on the agenda, the issue is still a matter of concern for all of us, and we want to solve it.
Mr. Minister, let me turn to your neighbor to the north, Syria. The civil war in Syria is now more than a decade old. As you mentioned in your opening remarks, its impact on Jordan has been horrific, 1.3 million refugees. The civil war has also dragged in many other countries, Russia, Iran, Israel. Almost daily, Israel bombs targets in Syria. And yet it's increasingly clear that the regime of Bashar al-Assad is not going away, and that it has consolidated its grip on the major urban areas of the country. Is it time for us to acknowledge reality here and begin dealing with Bashar al-Assad again, however unpleasant, however distasteful that may be, because he is the unfortunate winner, it appears, of this civil war, and we need to engage him, or should we continue to shun him?
We need to bring the Syrian crisis back to be about Syria and the Syrian people, because it's no secret that over the past few years, Syria became a battleground for regional and international rivalries. And that did not help. And again, if we look at the consequences of 11 years of war in Syria, they've been devastating in every way possible. Where do we go from here? Do we continue, as I said, to double down on approaches that did not work? Or do we say, wait, let's see what can be done within the realm of what's possible and what's real, and move forward? Our position in Jordan has always been that we need to solve this crisis. we all agree that 2254 is a benchmark that has the support and approval of everybody. So let's start a political process and let's engage effectively against very clear benchmarks that would put the interest of Syria and the Syrian people first. That is what we're trying to do here in Jordan. That's what we're talking to all our friends about, and that because we just simply cannot continue with the status quo. And again, status quo politics do not work. And with all due respect to all, we're within the range of fire. I mean, we in the region have been affected more than anybody else. We continue to be affected, and it is incomprehensible that everybody gets a seat on the table in trying to resolve the Syrian crisis, except for a collective Arab role that would be as effective and will be engaging. So I think the short answer is that we need to work all together towards a political solution that would aim to end this crisis, would aim to provide support for the Syrian people within the parameters of 2254 and move forward. There is no other alternative. The only alternative that we've seen over the past few years is the status quo politics, as I said, and that's just untenable and it cannot continue. So we have to move forward. And again, we need to look at the suffering of the Syrian people. 3 million Syrian kids of school-going age are not going to school. And you could imagine the longer-term impact of that reality. So we just cannot continue with business as usual. We have to look at ways of trying to pool our resources and move towards a solution to that crisis. We need to preserve the unity of Syria, its territorial integrity. We need to make sure that terrorist groups do not exploit the chaos that exists to regroup and then pose challenges to all of us. We need to make sure that no foreign power has the ability to project threatening postures to the region and beyond from Syria. So we've got a tall list of things to do, but we have to start, and I think we have to start through a political process, and the UN is engaged, and we coordinate fully with the UN, we coordinate with the US, we coordinate with our brethren, with our European partners, and I think everybody agrees that it is time to really try and see how we can work more effectively towards realizing that political solution.
I'd just like to follow up on that and ask what you're seeing from the Biden administration on this issue, and whether you see that there is a different or larger role for the United States on getting to a political solution at this stage of the Syrian crisis.
Look, I don't want to speak on behalf of the administration, but all I can tell you is that we're engaging very thoroughly, very deeply with the United States administration to see what we can do together and in coordination with other partners to move forward. I would say it is key for a US-Russian agreement also to be able to move forward with that issue. So again, we're engaged with all of them, and we're working with everybody to see what horizons we have and what steps are needed to be able to move forward.
Let me stick with the bilateral relationship. There's no secret that relations between Jordan and the Trump administration were difficult. The Trump administration put forward a so-called deal of the century that basically dealt Jordan out of the picture and promised to annex large parts of the West Bank to Israel. You've had a very different relationship with President Biden. He is a well-known figure in Jordan. He's been there many, many years. He was very strong in supporting Jordan last April, publicly and very, very unequivocally. We now have an American military presence in Jordan on the ground. We've long had Americans training Jordanians, but we actually now have American combat forces there, including last year Marines who went on to help with the evacuation in Afghanistan. You've mentioned that the relationship is strong and good. Do you envision the king making an early visit to Washington? What kind of signposts should we look for in the months ahead about broadening and deepening this relationship in the first half of 2022?
Sir, as you wrote in your own book, and as you know very well, the partnership and the friendship that Jordan and the U.S. Has is solid. It has continued to grow and get wider and deeper across various U.S. administrations. With the previous administration, I have to say, when it came to Jordanian-U.S. relations, they were solid. We continued to cooperate. We continued to do, and under the previous administration as well, the U.S. support for Jordan continued. So that is a solid track that was not affected. Obviously, when it came to the peace process, the previous administration has its views. We had our views. We again engaged in very frank, open conversation, and we said yes to what we thought would work, and we said no to what we thought would not work. So that disagreement on how to move with the peace process did not, I believe, impact the solid nature of Jordanian-U.S. relationship. On the quote-unquote deal of the century, our position is clear. We always said that there's no alternative to the two-state solution. We were against the confiscation of land, the Area C and the Palestinian territories. We believe that UNRWA should have and should continue to be supported because there's no alternative to UNRWA. So that is where we were at that period. With the Biden administration, as you said, that the president knows the Jordan very well. His Majesty and the president have had long, enduring friendship. They knew each other from many years before, and His Majesty was here and met with the president. It was an excellent meeting that spoke to the strength of the relationship, and we remain highly grateful to the commitment of the United States to support Jordan. So engagement with the administration continues on all fronts. Not just on the bilateral, but on how we can work together towards our joint objective of peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. His Majesty has spoken with the president many times as well, and hopefully there'll be other meetings soon in the future because that is the nature of our relationship. We continue to talk and we continue to meet, and we look forward for another summit between His Majesty and the President. On the issue of the military cooperation, as you know very well, we've always had a very strong military cooperation with the U.S. in terms of supplying our military needs, in terms of cooperation in the fight against terrorism, where we continue to fight side by side and shoulder by shoulder. And with the U.S. troops, their presence is frameworked within an agreement that does not allow for any military operations out of Jordan outside coordination and agreement. Their main presence there is to consolidate the working relationship, the coordination, the training, and the fight against terrorism. So I would say that what you see in terms of the development of the military relationship was born out of the commitment of the two countries to work together, and is geared towards addressing common challenges in ways that are coordinated and agreed by the two, and within the framework of the agreement that does specify what can and cannot be done in terms of the military presence, and the final say is to Jordan on what kind of operations happen there. And we have, again, we're friends, we're partners, we respect each other's sovereignty, and we work within that framework.
I wondered if we could broaden the aperture just a little bit in terms of Jordan's relationships across the region. There was a summit in Baghdad in June of 2021 that His Majesty King Abdullah II attended alongside Egyptian president and Iraqi leaders. This is happening with increased frequency, the engagement among Iraq, Egypt, and Jordan. And there has been some talk, including from several of the leaders themselves, about a new Levant. And I wondered if you could talk about Jordan's policy toward its own near abroad, toward its closest neighbors, and how Jordanian diplomacy is looking toward building these relationships among its key Arab neighbors.
Thank you. I think let me start with Iraq and say that we've had for years a very strong working relationship with Iraq. We We continue to support Iraq's stability. We do believe that it is imperative that Iraq succeeds in regaining its stability, rebuilding its country, and restoring its key role in the region. And as such, we have on the bilateral track, we continue to work together: economy, investment, trade, energy, connecting of the grids, looking at major projects like the Basra to Aqaba oil pipeline. So there's a lot that we're talking about with a view to consolidating that relationship. And also within the trilateral mechanism with Egypt, the idea is that we are natural partners, and there's a lot of complementarities that would from which everybody would benefit if we're able to maximize our ability to work together within a clear sort of roadmap that looks at where we can have win-win for the three countries and for the region. And I want to emphasize that this is a mechanism that we developed for for what's right for us. It's not against anybody. It's not a block in the old traditional definitions of blocks in the region. It's simply three countries realizing that there is a win-win scenario here for everybody if we're able to working together and move together. And it is, again, key that we support Iraq, because we cannot afford, nobody can afford for Iraq not to succeed in what it's trying to do in terms of rebuilding and restabilizing and ensuring enduring defeat of terrorist forces there. The region, look, we do need, I think everybody in the region realizes the need to build better institutions of regional cooperation. I think COVID has shown that we need to work closer together in terms of, for instance, food security, water security, climate, health cooperation, pharmaceutical industries, so that we come together and we pool our resources and move forward. So Jordan's position, Jordan's policy diplomacy has always been geared towards trying to build better institutions of regional cooperation. And there's a lot to be done there. And I think all of us in the region do feel conflict fatigue. All of us in the region are realizing more and more that it is important that we all work together on addressing those crises and move forward. So in a nutshell, I would say what we're looking at is to expand areas of cooperation in the region, and on grounds that ensure win-win for all, beyond the rhetoric and beyond the political sloganism. I'd say in practical manners, how can we work together? Everybody will benefit from creating regional mechanism for food security. Everybody will benefit from working together in the environment. Everybody will benefit from addressing the chronic water shortages in the region. So that is the nature of the conversation we're all having bilaterally within each other, and also under the umbrella of the Arab League, where we are at a stage where we all realize that there's much more to gain from working together and trying to approach it in a way that is sustainable, that factors in the priorities and needs and specificities of each country, building on that which is common and respecting that which is different, and channeling relations in a practical way that would ultimately reflect on progress towards our most important goal, which is providing decent, prosperous, dignified, safe lives for our peoples.
Building on Suzanne's widening the aperture, can I widen it a little bit further to the east? 5 years ago, the Iranian nuclear program was under very strong international supervision, backed by an agreement endorsed by the United Nations and signed by all 5 members of the Security Council, permanent members of the Security Council. The Iranian nuclear weapons program seemed to be no longer the threat that it had been for so many years before. In addition, the United States and Iran had a very open dialogue. Secretary of State John Kerry spoke with his Iranian counterparts frequently. Today, none of that's true. The agreement has been violated by the United States. The Iranians have proceeded with enriching more uranium. The United States and Iran have no dialogue at all. We're not even meeting with the Iranians in the meetings in Vienna. The Americans kind of hang around on the hallways trying to get any information they can from the Europeans and others. On the other hand, you, Mr. Minister, met with your Iranian counterpart, I understand, in Islamabad last year. What is Jordan's view on restoring the JCPOA, restoring dialogue in the region, including with a country that has been widely criticized for interfering in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, but which is still one of the major players in the Middle East?
But thank you for this question. And again, I think we all do recognize the need for ensuring that the Middle East does not embark on a nuclear race, and therefore the issue of nuclear armament must be addressed. We in Jordan have always been advocates of a Middle East free from all weapons of mass destructions. But when we look at the relationship with Iran, the nuclear issue is one issue, but there are other issues that need to be addressed in order for us to be able to have good relations with Iran. And I can say very comfortably that all Arab countries want good relations, good neighborly relations with Iran. But in order for that to happen, Iran needs to stop its interventionist policies in the region. And again, as I said, we have too many crises in the region. We have too many conflicts. We cannot afford another conflict. What we want are healthy relations with Iran. And in order for those relations to be healthy, and in order for avoiding more tension in the region, those relations need to be based on respecting the principle of non-intervention in Arab affairs, and Iran's policy in the regions need to be addressed. And the way to achieve that, we believe, is dialogue. And therefore, you're seeing a lot of Arab countries engaging in dialogues with Iran. And again, the purpose is to making sure that relations are based on not interfering in Arab affairs. That's what we want. That's what we seek. I ran into the Iranian foreign minister in Pakistan as part of the OIC meeting, which was called for by Saudi Arabia to address the rising challenge in Afghanistan and how we can all work together to make sure that Afghanistan does not collapse into chaos and does not become yet again a safe haven for terrorists. And you know better than anybody how dangerous that situation would be. So again, all Arabs want good relations with Iran. The path to achieving those good relations is addressing all issues that has been the root cause of problems and tension, and that starts and that does not end with the nuclear component. That has to also address relations in the region and Iran's policies in the region. And again, all of us are ready to move in that direction, but those issues are real and those issues must be addressed.
Let me just stay on the topic of Iran for a little bit longer. Obviously, as Bruce noted, the United States, the Biden administration has been heavily engaged in diplomacy on and around Iran without the benefit of access to direct talks with Iranian diplomats. And that is not obviously the Biden administration's preference. It is the decision of the Iranian government. We've seen the resumption of the nuclear talks in Vienna, and at least some more positive noises about the possibility of, if not reconstituting the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in its full form from 2015, perhaps some kind of a breakthrough that might bring both sides closer to some kind of compliance with the original terms of the deal. Perhaps an interim agreement that might provide for some sanctions relief for Iran in exchange for resuming some of the constraints on the nuclear activities that were presupposed by the original deal. If that kind of a breakthrough happens, either the return to the nuclear deal or some kind of an interim nuclear agreement, how will the region view that, particularly because the concerns originally about the deal were that it dealt only with the nuclear issue and not with the very legitimate concerns that many of Iran's neighbors have with its interventionist policies across the Middle East?
Well, as I said, I mean, addressing the nuclear issue is essential and it's very, very important, but it's not enough. And again, going to the bottom line of what we all want in the region, which is good relations where we can all cooperate and work together, In order to get there, we need to address other aspects of that relationship. So on the table for discussion and for resolution must be other areas which caused tension in the region and which at some point came to very, very critical stages. And that means addressing Iran's policies in the region, its relationship with its neighbors, and again, stopping interventionist policies and respecting the sovereignty and not interfering in those relations. That is the area. Again, we all want good relations. We cannot afford another conflict. We don't want another conflict. It is important to address the nuclear file, but it is also important to address causes of tension in the region. And that, as I said, has to result in a reality where relations are built on the principles of non-intervention and respect of the sovereignty and good neighborly relations.
Mr. Minister, you mentioned Afghanistan earlier. Jordan was a supporter of operations in Afghanistan, including putting troops on the ground for medical purposes and others. Last August, the United States withdrew from Afghanistan. And as a result, the NATO alliance withdrew from Afghanistan. This came after 20 years of successive American presidents, Republicans and Democrats, saying we would never, ever abandon Afghanistan. Afghans now feel abandoned. Believe me, I hear it all the time. I don't want you to speak about the American operation per se, but I would like to hear, did you think that the Taliban government in Afghanistan is now a dangerous threat to the region? Are you worried about the rebuilding of terrorist facilities and terrorist camps in Afghanistan? And do you also worry just about the symbolism of a very radical and extreme and intolerant Islamist government coming to power in Afghanistan?
Sir, but as you said, Jordan was involved in Afghanistan many years ago, and our involvement was twofold. One was part of the international effort led by the US to fight terrorism and fight terrorist groups in Afghanistan, and making sure that they do not build capacity that would enable them to threaten security and stability of all of us. And the second part was a humanitarian role whereby Jordan provided medical facilities and tried to work and help the Afghani people. Situation now is obviously not ideal, but the question is, where do we go from here and what choices do we have? Taliban is back. It is there. Do we leave it to its own? And then not just in terms of terrorism, questions must be asked. Does it have the tools to govern? Does it have the tools to stabilize? What will happen if it fails? Can we afford for Afghanistan to fall into lawlessness and chaos again? Or do we try and have a benchmarked engagement that is coordinated among all of us with a view to making sure that all the issues of concerns to us are addressed? Again, as I said, we do not get to choose, we did not get to choose how the situation evolved, but we have a reality there now. And I think we believe that we need to engage, but that engagement should be geared towards realizing very specific objectives that would ultimately and most importantly benefit the Afghani people, and then again mitigate against all the issues that you just raised against all of us. So and I do believe that Arabs and Muslims have a key role here in coordination with the US, Europeans and other partners, and we need to engage, and that engagement should be based on clear objectives that we have in terms of respecting human rights, in terms of respecting women's rights, right to education, in terms of again not allowing terrorist groups to exist and operate out of there. I believe this is the only way we have to go forward. So the simple answer is, I think we need to engage, but engagement should not be outside an agreed framework in terms of what we can do to address this reality and make sure that whoever is in charge in Afghanistan is moving on the right track. And I think we have we have a big role to play, particularly as Arabs and Muslims, to try and again work with the Afghanis to make sure that we all stick to the true values of Islam, which are values of peace, respect for the other, respect for human rights. It's a lot of work. It needs to be done. I don't think Taliban should be left to its own, and I don't think we should just resort to statements and positions that are not going to change on the ground. I think we need to have a very clear institutionalized approach that identify that which we want to achieve in Afghanistan in terms of stability and respect for human rights and moving forward in fighting terrorism. And we should agree on who does what and how and where and move forward with that plan.
Let me just stay on the topic of counterterrorism for just a few moments. One of the concerns that many had with the US departure from Afghanistan, as well as the changing nature of the US mission in Iraq, has been our capacity to respond and to preempt terrorist attacks across the region. Obviously, not just those emanating from Afghanistan, but what we've seen in terms of extremist groups that have operated in various parts of the region. Jordan is no stranger to this, as both a victim of terrorism, but also a very important partner in the US effort to counter terrorism across the region. What is your sense of the state of the threat at this time and of our joint response to that threat?
Well, we continue to work very, very closely with the US and with other partners under the umbrella of the International Coalition Against Daesh. That's an area that we all have clarity on what needs to be done, and we coordinate very closely. That said, the threat of terrorism remains very potent. As His Majesty had said repeatedly, Daesh has been defeated but not destroyed. And in order to make sure that Daesh and Al-Qaeda and Hurras al-Din and other groups do not regroup and rebuild their capacity, we have to have a holistic approach to the fight against terrorism. You've got the military component of the fight, you've got the intelligence component of the fight, but you also have the intellectual component of the fight, where we have to work to discredit their claim to the representation of Islam and to suffocate their ability to disseminate their agenda of hate and rejection on the internet and elsewhere. Terrorism thrives on chaos. Terrorism thrives on hopelessness. Terrorism thrives in places where there is lawlessness, where people have no hope, where people have no education. And it's key, therefore, that we work more rigorously towards solving regional crises through which Daesh and others penetrate. And we have the Aqaba process in Jordan that tries to really offer a platform for all of us to come together and look at the terrorism sort of map collectively and holistically, not just in terms of geography, because if you get terrorists in Syria and you get them in Iraq and you don't get them in Libya, they're going to regroup. You don't get them in Libya, you get them in Libya, you don't get them in Somalia and Africa, they're going to regroup. So we have that holistic approach, and that's why His Majesty launched the Aqaba process. I think the threat remains potent. We have to stay resilient, and we have to continue to fight on three fronts: military, where there's a need, intelligence cooperation is important. And remember, a lot of the terrorist operations that we've seen in Europe and elsewhere have been bedroom radicalization, lone wolves, relying on the internet to get resources, and that's where they're being radicalized as well. So we see Daesh trying to regroup on our border in Syria. We see them trying to regroup on our borders in Iraq as well. We see them in the Sahel area and other parts of Africa. We cannot say that the fight is over. Maybe its nature has changed. Daesh no longer have territorial control, but the battle has shifted now to the virtual sphere and to other spaces. And I think key to that is countering the messages and defeating their ability to spread their agenda of hate. And that's an area, by the way, in which in Jordan we're doing a lot of work, and we're sharing our experience with our partners, and we continue to work very, very closely with the US and with other partners in the global coalition and with our brethren and partners in the region and beyond as well.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring up one other country in the region where the situation is profoundly sad and disturbing, and that's Yemen. We're now entering the 7th year of the war in Yemen. It is clear the Houthis are not going to be defeated. It is also clear that the Yemeni people are paying a horrendous cost for this war. The UN recently estimated that almost 400,000 people have died in this war. The vast majority of those deaths did not come from military operations. They came from starvation and diseases that are usually under control. We also have the truly extraordinary situation in which the cities and military facilities of Saudi Arabia are under steady, almost daily attack by the Houthis using missiles, drones. The disparity in power between Saudi Arabia and the Houthis is extraordinary, but it's the Houthis who are attacking Riyadh and other places like that. And as we all know, some of that is with the assistance of the Iranians. Jordan has been trying, I understand, to play a useful role in promoting dialogue in Yemen these days. Could you speak a little bit more about what Jordan's role has been and how you think this process can be given some boost so that we can put an end to this terrible humanitarian catastrophe?
Well, first of all, let me just again emphasize what you just said, that this is a horrific humanitarian catastrophe, and the impact of it is going to be with us for many, many years to come from a humanitarian, developmental, educational perspective. So ending this crisis is a priority for all of us in the region and in the international community. The problem, as you said, is that we're not seeing progress in efforts to resolve the conflict because of the refusal by the Houthis to engage and to implement agreements that have been reached, including the Riyadh agreements that we all thought put us on a right path to go forward. The other thing I want to emphasize here is that we do stand by our brother in Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries in doing whatever they can to defend themselves against those terrorist attacks by Houthis into their cities and to their civilian targets as well. We believe that in order for that crisis to end, Houthis need to commit and work with the UN and work with the others in, to implement the many agreements that have been reached and the many resolutions by the Security Council that have been taken. In Jordan, again, we host, as you know, the UN mission for Yemen. We provide them with every support that they have. Quite often they ask us to convene meetings for various Yemeni groups, and we do that in coordination with them. There's been a lot of meetings that address the issue of release of prisoners and exchange of prisoners, and some success was achieved there. But I think we know what needs to be done to solve that conflict. As I said, Riyadh agreements and other accords that have been reached over the years do offer a political path. What has been missing is commitment by Houthis to implement what they agreed to and to engage in earnest in those political processes with a view to moving forward.
I'd like to bring us back to where we started to talk a little bit about this really monumental deal for water cooperation with Israel, but really, again, to widen the aperture and to talk a little bit more about the impact of climate across the region and Jordan's role and efforts to try to mitigate that. The Middle East, of course, is a potential significant victim of what we're seeing in terms of climate change. There are predictions that many of the cities of the region may become uninhabitable even within our lifetime. The region is warming at nearly twice the global average and may reach at least 4 degrees Celsius increase by 2050. Jordan has, of course, played an important role in terms of convening its neighbors, in terms of its own efforts to promote renewable energy. But I wondered if you could talk about how Jordan, as an energy poor country, may see the prospects for addressing climate change while also ensuring resilience and sustainable energy.
Well, I mean, that is a major challenge for us. And, we're one of the most arid countries on earth. And even if we have the most efficient management system of our water resources, that is not enough. We need to continue to look for newer resources. We've signed the MOU with the Israelis and the Emiratis, as you know, and discussions are there to see how viable and how fast we can move with that. That's one aspect of it. So that's still a very, very early stage, and technical talks are taking place. And ultimately, we're going to see how we can implement in ways that would address our needs. We also have other national projects in Jordan. We have the Amman Aqaba conveyance project, which would help address some of our water needs as well. Of course, we had hoped that the RED for Dead, which the previous Israeli government unfortunately walked away from and aborted, would have had a major impact, again, not just in meeting our water needs and the Palestinians' water needs and Israelis' water needs, but also in terms of a very positive environmental impact and preserving the unique ecosystem of the Red Sea. So we do have our plans. We are pioneers in the region in terms of our solar energy capacity and development. We're going to continue to do that. We've already met the 14% target of carbon emission that was we met it, I think, about last year. So now we've moved up our goal to 30%, and we continue to work on that track. But ultimately, in order for us to be able to address that growing challenge, as said, we all need to have a regional sort of and global approach to that, and we remain committed to working with our partners on how to move forward for that. Solar energy, as I said, has been a success story in Jordan. We're moving with that, creating and finding new water resources, including through desalination, is something that we're working on. But also we're looking at ensuring a much more efficient utilization of the water resources that we have. So we're looking at the distribution network, how we can address certain leaks in it and make sure that we use every drop of water effectively. We're also looking at improving the agricultural sector and irrigation techniques with to make sure that we have a much more efficient, again, utilization of our meager water resources. The challenge that we're facing in Jordan is also the increase in population as a result of regional crises and as a result of refugees coming to Jordan and their numbers growing as the years go by. So whatever plans we had have to be adjusted constantly to address the growing demand that's emerging from the refugee populations that continue to be there and grow. And also, as we look at improving the efficiency of our economy, moving to bigger industries, we also want to be able to meet their needs for water and energy resources. Cost of energy in Jordan has been extremely high, and that has impacted the viability of a lot of businesses. So we're looking at ways through which we can bring down that cost, and that is taking place against the backdrop of major economic reforms that we've been working on, alongside with political reforms that would create a better sort of environment and a better ecosystem that would allow for addressing the needs of our people, making sure that we have foreign investment that creates more jobs and accelerate the development process that we have. As I said, the last 10 years have not been very nice to us. The external shocks with which we have to deal over the past 10 years in terms of refugees, in terms of threats from the border, securing borders, in terms of closure of borders, disruption of trade, disruption of tourism, that has been very, very, very difficult for us. But then again, measures that we've taken are putting us back on track. We've just had 3 successful reviews with the IMF, which speaks to the soundness of the measures that we're taking. Challenges are big, they're enormous, but we also clear on where we need to go and how we're going about it. And we continue, unfortunately, to have to mitigate against external shocks. Just one example, for instance, our borders with Syria are 367 kilometers. In the past few years, the biggest threat from the situation there was terrorist groups that a lot of them were on our border. Now the biggest threat is the smuggling of drugs, and that's a huge challenge for us. Hardly a week passes by without our military aborting one or two attempts to bring in drugs into the country. And the difference between now and a few years ago when it comes to drug smuggling is that in the past we were looked at as a transit market, because the trade was or the smuggling was in traditional drugs that are a bit expensive, and purchasing power in Jordan was not, that is not high enough to have a big market for that. But now with the advent of chemical drugs like Kiptagon, we're becoming a target, and that's a challenge that we're facing. So, again, if we look at the whole ecosystem, we've had some tough times in the past, but our work to mitigate continues to be strong and solid and anchored in clear planning and towards clear objectives. And I want to say we will not have been able to do all of that had it not been for the support of key partners like the United States and other partners in Europe and elsewhere.
But one more of your neighbors, Lebanon, is in acute distress. It had a horrible explosion in its port. Its economy has basically fallen apart. It also has, in essence, a state within a state, the Hezbollah, which operates as one of the most dangerous terrorist groups in the world. Just this week, they hosted a major conclave of anti-Saudi dissidents, including representatives of the Houthis. Some states in the region have decided that it's a time to just freeze relations with Lebanon and, in effect, walk away from it, and have urged their citizens to leave the country. I don't believe Jordan has been in that camp. I believe you've continued to insist on engagement, even acknowledging how difficult the situation is. What is your thoughts on the moving ahead in Lebanon and trying to save that country from even worse downfall?
Well, I mean, we were really extremely alarmed by what's happening in Lebanon, and we're extremely saddened as well. Lebanon was a great country. Its people have been always very resilient. They've been able to overcome many, many challenges in the past, and now they're in a situation where poverty is rampant, services are disrupted, people are not being able to put food on the table, and that's an alarming situation. As I said, we have enough crisis in the region. We don't want Lebanon to continue down the very dangerous path in which the country is moving. And that's why from the first day, His Majesty made sure that we do provide our Lebanese brethren with every possible support that we can. Right after the explosion, he dispatched a military hospital that was there trying to provide support. After that, we coordinated support to Lebanon with all our partners, and we continue to do everything we possibly can to help them. We cannot afford for Lebanon to fail. And I think we are aware of the major challenges that Lebanon is facing, but we cannot abandon it, and we'll continue in Jordan to do whatever we can to help the Lebanese, because the consequences of Lebanon going, further into its crisis are going to be enormous for all of us. We're aware of the challenges, but we have to help. We'll continue to help, and ultimately, Lebanon is going to have to address a lot of its own internal challenges, and the Lebanese government is going to have to do what it needs to do to meet the needs of its people. But I think our support globally and regionally is important. The alternative to that support is not something that we don't want to think about, and therefore we continue to engage and we continue to do whatever we can. We are in discussions with the Prime Minister and his government, and recently, as you know, we've been working with them on trying to provide them with both electricity from Jordan and gas through Jordan. we've been able to conclude an agreement that would allow for the exportation of energy through Syria into Lebanon, connecting our grid to their grid. Also, discussions are extremely advanced in terms of providing Egyptian gas through Jordan, through Syria. And there, we're doing all of that in coordination with the United States, with other partners, with the World Bank, to make sure that we do get this support to the Lebanese, because they simply need it. Lebanon was a leading Arab country in terms of enlightenment, publishing, modernity, and all of that. And I think we need to do everything we possibly can to help the Lebanese. They need to help themselves, obviously, but in Jordan, we're going to continue to do whatever we can to help in that process. We cannot afford to have Lebanon fail, and we hope it will not.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. We are nearing the end of our time, but I do want to try to bring in one question that actually several of the members of our audience have posed. Ziada Salih and Ahmed Dawas from the Green Tree Foundation have both posed questions in our chat about what concrete steps and mechanisms the Jordanian government is taking to facilitate foreign investment in the country, recognizing that this is such an important priority. So I'd like to give you just a moment or two to talk about that before we know that you do have another appointment, and we'll have to close our session in just a few minutes.
Basically, we're doing everything we possibly can to move with that. We're trying now to look at all legislative adjustments that need to be done to render the country much more attractive for foreign investment. We do realize that we need the private sector to play a major role in the economy in order for us to be able to create the jobs that are needed. As I said, against the backdrop of unemployment in Jordan on average about 25%. We do realize that attracting foreign investment is key. So there's a full package of economic reforms in terms of bringing down barriers, again, legislative reforms and changes that would ease doing business in Jordan, looking at ensuring that we have an IT sector that's very active, that all the infrastructure for investments are there. And also part of that, we're working on trying to find markets, build complementarity with our regions, so that industries, businesses, when they come to Jordan, they also have the opportunity to export into the region and therefore expand the area of their operations. We're trying to highlight further the fact that if you do business in Jordan, then you'll have access to some of the biggest markets in the world, because of free trade agreements that we have with the US, with Canada, with Europe, and with African countries as well. We have not moved as quickly as we would have liked in the past. Again, part of it due to internal factors, part of it due to regional circumstances. But I think I have to say that our marching orders in the government are clear. We need to move forward effectively, and there's a comprehensive plan that the government has announced to address all deficiencies in the economy and to take all the steps necessary to render it more effective and to ensure that it functions better, including a key area, which is looking at all barriers to bringing in foreign investment and address them quickly and effectively, and make sure that everybody realizes that Jordan is open for business and that Jordan does offer opportunities. And now, again, there's a lot of competition. We're aware of that, and investors are not going to come unless they know they're going to have good returns. So we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that we provide the environment that allows them to work successfully, and also help open markets. And of course, we have a tremendously able workforce in Jordan, and that is an advantage as well. So we have, as I said, we have major economic reforms. We don't have the space or the time to go in details into them now, but they're available, and they've been published and they're being shared, and you'll be seeing more and more announcement of such measures in the near future.
Thank you so much, Mr. Foreign Minister, for this incredibly rich and thoughtful and wide-ranging discussion. We recognize that you have a very busy schedule during your time here in Washington, and we're so grateful to you for the time that you've taken with the Brookings Institution and all of our audience on Zoom. We look forward to staying in touch and to welcoming you back, we hope in person, on your next visit to Washington.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for this wonderful conversation. And again, looking forward to seeing you soon in person, and my best wishes for a better new year for all, and hopefully we'll all get over COVID soon and get back to business as usual. So stay well and stay safe, and thank you so much. I'm honored for this opportunity.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos from Brookings.